Welcome to Book the Business, the podcast where we explore how experts, entrepreneurs, and business leaders turn what they know into a book and use that book to build their authority, create opportunities, and grow their business. My guest today is Georgie Dickins. Georgie is an internationally recognized leadership authority, speaker, author, podcast host, and C-suite coach and confidant. She works with Fortune 50 executives and visionary leaders, helping them unlock stronger performance and create transformative results. Her book, Stratospheric CEOs, was published with Rethink Press in 2024. Georgie, welcome to Book the Business.
Thank you for having me, Joe. It's really good to be here.
So, Georgie, I love your book. Tell me a bit more about why you wrote it, because it's brought in lots and lots of wisdom from conversations with leaders, impactful leaders of very large organizations. I'd love to know, what was the driver for you writing and publishing this book?
Yeah, no, I'll explain the genesis. I'd like to start by saying, the biggest thank you to Rethink Press. I am somebody who pretty much in anything in life, whether it's a restaurant, a holiday, it's all about, who comes recommended. And when I was in that stage of deciding, was I going to self-publish? Was I going to traditionally publish? I was flip-flopping between so many different tracks. And there were several colleagues of mine, well, not colleagues, friends, who have had books published by Rethink Press. And they could not have spoken more highly about the experience, the partnership with you and your team. And that was exactly my experience. And I must have rewritten this book like 3 or 4 times. And their patience with, it's good, we're here for you. You just felt there was someone in your corner. That for me was really important, and partnership for me is really important. And I think in the world that we live in today, where there's AI obviously is transforming businesses, but that human connection is so important. And I know, so you lead an incredible team, and so thank you for that experience.
Thank you, Georgie. And I'll just say I feel very blessed to have attracted a brilliant team. However it's happened, we've got wonderful people around us that obsess over doing the right thing, getting those books right, working with authors. So I love that. Thank you so much. So tell me, you wrote the book. It's not a book where you could just write easily. This came from lots and lots of conversation, lots of learning. So tell me how it came about.
Yeah, I left the corporate world. I was in banking for in the corporate space for 20 years, and I left and set up a boutique business in trusted advisory and C-suite coaching around 10 years ago. And what really came through for me is I'd be in conversations with some of these just incredible leaders, and they just drop these sound bites and lessons and insights. And there's me thinking, I've just got to try and hold on to all of these because a single insight can shift everything. A single lesson can put you on a completely different trajectory. And, these were such incredible leaders who'd achieved such extraordinary results. And like, that's not by chance. There is no one's, there is no like playbook that they've used. They've kind of figured out the journey along the way and had mentors and who've helped them and supported them. But a lot of it, they are creators, they are change makers, they are, the visionaries you mentioned. And so I approached one of them. And he, on one particular occasion, there was just like so many great insights, one-liners he shared. And I said, I went back afterwards and I said, I captured all your insights. Like, these are chapters of a book. And he came back like a day later and said, let's do it.
Mm.
And so then like my fear factor set in, because I'm like, okay, well, I kind of, that's just, I felt compelled to tell him, but I suppose I'd never written a book before. The last time I wrote anything of any length was when I was at school or at university doing my A levels. But I was like, what if I could become an author? What if I could be the raconteur of these leaders' stories? And I feel like I'm in this very privileged space where I get to be behind the curtain. I get to be in connection and conversation with such great leaders who have achieved exceptional things. So I kind of, I suppose, gave myself the audacious goal of, what if I could choose these, I think it was 7 leaders from founder CEOs in financial technology that are creating multi-billion-dollar growth stories. And I was very specific with the niche because for me, there is something about that founder CEO combination. You said the word obsessive a minute ago. Like, founders, it's their business. They're obsessive. They deeply care. They're passionate. They're driven. They're motivated. There's this relentless pursuit in what they're creating. So that founder energy for me was something that was so infectious and activating. The CEO piece, that kind of partnership, the reason that pairing spoke to me is because it's one thing to have an idea. Ideas, so many people have ideas, but there's
Mm.
quite another thing in taking that idea and creating a multi-billion dollar growth story and creating teams and getting shareholders and creating products that the market needs and wants. And I think that leadership piece, or actually, I think the leaders I work with, it's more followership. That combination was really interesting to me. So I initially, there was one leader I spoke to who, as we were chatting in our pre-work, Lance Iglor, who'd founded a company called Market. And I was fortunate enough at the time, I didn't work with him, but I was fortunate I knew someone who knew him. And I said to it's a chap called Mark Beeston, and he's the managing partner of a VC firm. I said, look, I know that he's your, one of your network nodes, Lance. I have this ambition and I would like, I've got a couple that have said yes, but I would like, he is just this ultimate e- entrepreneur extraordinaire. Like, can you help me connect with him? And he said, right, well, share a little bit of, share a little blurb around what the book is and what you're creating. I'll share that with him. I can't promise anything. Literally within half an hour of me sending the note, he's like, Lance is in. And that was like,
Mm.
when you look back in life and you think about some pinch me moments, that was a
Yeah.
pinch me moment because Lance then has become such a great advocate for my work. And we've written a book, the two of us wrote another book together last year. He was also an incredible connector because he believed in the vision. He believed in the what I was creating, and really the underpinning, I suppose, or the mission behind it is that I wanted to democratize the wisdom, the lessons, the insights, the stories that these leaders, these entrepreneurs, I wanted to hear their journey and put
Yeah.
that into a book and make it accessible to those who are creating unicorn businesses, to those who want to have this meaningful impact to the world, to those that want to reimagine markets and revolutionize. And so that was the genesis, and it just grew really organically. I say organically, maybe with the prism of hindsight, it was I'm going to say there was a lot of luck, but again, look, it's I had someone who believed in what I was creating, and so Stratospheric CEOs, the vision of it was born, and it was just the most. I love learning. I love growing. If I go back to the word obsessive, I'm an obsessive
Mm.
learner. I'm an obsessive reader. And I got to have conversations with these leaders like every day. And so every day
Amazing.
I was up leveled. Every day I was walking away with a new insight. And also all those insights were feeding my coaching work because I was
Mm.
becoming more knowledgeable, and I just had greater perspective in terms of what I knew what it took from the leaders I work with, but I was hearing from other leaders as
Yeah.
well. So it's been just the most enjoyable path. And I genuinely thank my lucky stars every day that I get to live my dream job.
I love that. That's amazing. And so the journey, so you had a vision for the book and
Mm.
you had one person, like a critical person saying, I'm in. But effectively, you created a mastermind of visionary, exceptional. I mean, stratospheric is the word because
Mm.
you've used the word unicorn, but these are businesses that are, I mean, top
Multi
1%,
unicorn.
top
Oh, yeah,
0.1%
no,
of,
like the 0.000%. Like, yeah, they
yeah,
are, yeah, and the reason I chose stratospheric, and it was very intentional. When you think about the atmosphere, the universe, like the stratosphere, it's the rarefied atmosphere. The people I work with, it's the rarefied atmosphere. And there's one thing to get there, is quite another thing to stay there, hence that founder CEO combination.
yeah,
That book has served me really well, and then that led me to go on to create the Stratospheric Leaders podcast. And next year, I think I'm allowed to share this, but I'm launching the Stratospheric Leadership Institute,
amazing.
which is a platform. I write a lot. I love speaking, and it will be an incredible platform to continue that work, and also to house all the content that I'm putting out into the world.
That's amazing. So from the book, it's become kind of a genesis. This was very well kind of thought through. You had a vision, a genesis for building a business around that to further democratize. Not everybody's going to have access in the way you've done through your authorship, to have those conversations, to see how these amazing leaders and entrepreneurs and CEOs think, to be able to express that wisdom, or to disseminate that wisdom in a way that other people can get it through you as a conduit. In a way, you're kind of masterminded it. You synthesized 7 CEOs in this book, 7 founder CEOs, um, synthesizing that for people to be able to get that value without having to go through the huge effort it would have been to create that book and write that book. Not everybody's going to be able to go to that effort, or
Yeah,
want to be able to go to that effort to get the
look,
gifts.
I think writing a book is, I don't even know how I'm going to call it at parts a really painful experience, because I love having conversations. I love drawing out, I love being able to create the space to draw out the wisdom and the insights that I believe um, would really kind of benefit the future change makers, that the emerging visionaries. And I initially had the conversations, and then I planned to outsource the writing. There was several people I went through. I thought they could ghostwrite the book. It just didn't. It didn't work. You and I spoke in the prep session about how, sometimes on podcasts, you record and
Mm.
AI generates lots of clips, but it misses the nuance. It misses the sentiment behind how something's expressed. So and this was the same thing with the ghostwriters. It didn't totally get. It just. I had such a vision for this, and there was a delta between where I wanted it to be and where what was being produced.
Yeah.
So that's when I'm like, I have to try this myself.
Yeah.
And I was in, and to be fair, I partnered with this brilliant chap, Lawrence, who is a writer, and so he was my partner, my sounding board along the way, and his partner Anna, they were brilliant. And we were on holiday in the States. This is several years ago now, and for whatever reason, I was like, because it was a family holiday, I was like, right, I'm going to write the book. So I was, and the weather wasn't great. So it was unexpectedly poor weather. And I must have written about 50% of the book that week, like 4 or 5 hours a day.
Wow.
Maybe not 50%, but I made such headway that then I had momentum and there was energy. And I was like, I'd kind of just, because I knew what I wanted to write, I just needed, you know, space that was free from noise, free from distraction. And once I had that space, I'm like, actually, this is really good
Mm.
fun. And that's when I approached Rethink, because I'm like, right, I now need a partner to take it to where it needs to be. But yeah, there was a journey to get there. And writing was initially quite painful until I found the joy.
Yeah, and I love that, finding the joy. I'm gonna flick over to a question here. So, working with such exceptional people, they've achieved success that most people can't even, like. I can't contemplate some of the figures of what that would even mean in real terms. Um, what, in your experience, and we're not talking about anybody individually, I don't want to call them out. What drives them beyond that? Like, because you mentioned the word joy, is there a sense of making an impact? Is there something bigger? Is it just a drive that, again, you've used the word obsessive? What drives them to go even further? Because a lot of people go, "I've made it now. It's time to settle down and relax." But
Yeah.
I imagine most of those people
Yeah.
don't do that. They're driven.
They are so different, and everyone has got a different. Each of them have got a different motivation. But I think because they're entrepreneurs, they're just ultimate business builders. They can see an unmet need, and when they've achieved that, they can see another unmet need. So they are these ultimate business builders and value creators, and then, I mean, they do then on the side a lot of philanthropy and social impact, because they get to, they're in a position where they then get to make a meaningful difference through scholarship programs, and they just care about impact. But I think the leaders I certainly work with, I don't see them ever retiring. One of the leaders, he's a CEO, founder, chairman. Like, I mean, he's in his 70s. He's having the time of his life. He would say, I'm living my dream job because I get to create. And, whether you're creating, you're a Steve Jobs or a Elon Musk, or you're the leaders I work with in financial markets, you're creating something meaningful. You're fulfilling this unmet need. And I think that's and there's just this relentless pursuit of that. And I think it's interesting. There was a leader I worked with in Silicon Valley, and they achieved an extraordinary milestone. And I said, well, what did you guys, when I say guys, team, not, what did you do to celebrate? And he said, well, we had a cup of tea and a piece of cake, and we got a cake in, and then we moved on. And like, this is a multi-billion dollar business. And it's like the celebration, it's not absent of celebrating, but it's like they are buzzing with ideas of what they want to do. So you never rest
Yeah,
and
the
get
joy
banged up.
almost is in the pursuit. Like there's not
Yeah.
it's not like we'll get here and then we'll be happy, or we'll get here and we'll celebrate. It's the pursuit and the creation and the meeting those unmet needs and making the impact. Seems like that's where the joy is anyway. That's
Yeah, and Lance, who I referenced earlier, he created a company called Market. If you ask any of his leadership team, or I think pretty much actually anyone in the organization, what is a motto that Lance stood for? And it was raise the bar. It was that constant pursuit of betterment, however good they were doing. And he talked about raise the bar, then widen the gap. Because sometimes you raise the bar and you're the best of the best. Look at Steve Jobs, you're the best of the best, but widen the gap then means like, well, how do we then make sure that we're even further away from the competition? So there is never a complacent. Another leader I work with, Fernandez said, if it ain't broke, break it. And because if you think, well, if it ain't broke, like just leave it, but leave it alone. But he's like, no, if it ain't broke, break it. Like the world around us is so innovative and agile that, if it's still doing well, like see how you can get it. That speaks to that raised about how can we make it even better? And that's the kind of energy that activates me.
yeah.
So I just find myself and I think I was a bit of an entrepreneur in residence when I was in the corporate market. I'm not suggesting I'm creating the same level of value that they're creating, but I I I I I I see the characteristics and the qualities they bring to their businesses, and I see those, I see those qualities in myself too.
I love that. And that's great because we're all on a journey wherever we end up. Um, and you talked earlier about you're obsessed with growth and learning and developing, and that's amazing. This made me think. We talked about Lance's book, Raise the Bar. You actually curate beautiful books with some of the leaders. So um, beyond your own book, which is a fantastic book, and I imagine that opened the doors. Like you got people on board, and we'll talk about that in a moment if that's okay. Like what are the pinch me moments other than getting somebody amazing on board have you experienced from the book? But you curate. I use the term when we were talking just ahead of the podcast. I see you as a curator and a creator at the same time because there are beautiful books that a handful of people will get. It's kind of an artifact. Tell me more about that and the different books
Yeah.
you
So
potentially done.
the one I showed you, this is it's called Raise the Bar. And it's 250 of, I've mentioned Lance a lot, but Lance's lessons. And when I wrote the Stratospheric CEO book with all the leaders, they're all in one book, but they've all got a book and multiple books that could be written about them. So I approached Lance, and he's been on my podcast several times, and I'm like, every time we have conversations, I keep thinking, well, I'm not going to learn anything new. I mean, I've taken the 1,000 lessons that I've already learned from him, and every time there's something new. Whether it's about how he allocates capital, whether it's how he makes tough decisions, whether it's how to be, how to make decisions when everything's moving so fast. Like again, I'm always learning. So I went to him and said, look, I think we create your own book. And he's like, sure. He was very, we'd had the success of Stratospheric CEOs. And then this book, and every book is different, but this is, as you said, it's beautifully curated. It's his top 250 lessons. So all very systemized into different
Oh,
topics. And hold on, let me just open it up here. But like all these different
that's
lessons,
gorgeous.
and And again, it was a joyful experience bringing it together. And for me, it's how can I help Lance, who's exceptionally busy creating and building? How can I help, not help, but be the partner that helps create that legacy of
Yeah.
his work? Because he has so many people, you know, coming to him for advice and talks, requests for talks, and it's like, well, again, I can help put that into a body of work that is a beautiful body of work. Not just, we work with a chap with John, who was exceptional in terms of the artistry
Yeah.
around the work of the book. But it was just, I love doing it. I love
Yeah.
doing it.
So moving on from that, your own book, which did have more of a kind of a wide, the intention was that more people could get it because you wanted to democratize this. There was an intention behind that. What are some of the things that have happened as a result of that book? You already were working with exceptional people. Have you seen more kind of pinch me moments, more opportunities?
Yeah, and do you know, I was so fortunate because we launched the book in September 2024. We did a big launch party in New York, and I was able to get the majority of the leaders who happened to be in New York that date. I hosted a panel where they were speaking. We had 120 global leaders in the room, so it was a very kind of select group of people who we invited, and it was. I think when it comes to having a book, and I've written 7 books. So this was, but this is the one that look, I published many more books before. This was the first book I wanted to write,
Mhm.
but it took me several rewrites and getting them over myself and knowing what good enough looked like. So there were quite a few other books that came out self-published before that. But it it credentializes you. I think when it comes to speaking events, when it comes to my business is all, or our business is all word of mouth referral. And so I think if I'm being referred to another CEO and they do a digital drive-by of me, and they get a sense of who I am, the types of leaders that I work with. And even that just gives them a sense of like, yeah, Georgie's for me or she's not for me. So I think that credentialization is really valuable. And I think for the speaking as well, there might be certain themes that people have picked up on in the book. They're like, right, this is a particular area we as an organization are focused on. We would love for you to come and run a session or do a keynote on a particular element of the book. And it's just also, I think, thirdly, it's the network of and I've never, for these leaders, I've never said, could you introduce me to such and such? I've never but I've been introduced to so many extraordinary people by virtue of the fact they've organically said, Georgie, you must meet X. And that has just been an incredible experience. And I think
Yeah.
the book has just been I suppose it's a bit like and also a living and breathing CV.
Yeah.
Um, and I do believe the book is evergreen, a bit like Jim Collins, the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. To me, this book is universal to, all existing leaders, future leaders. And whether you read it now, whether you read it in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, I think the lessons are still
Yeah. We,
applicable.
I'd say a couple of the aphorisms you've already shared. So, raise the bar, widen the gap. If it ain't broke, break it. That kind of timeless wisdom is always going to be wisdom. And I think that's what you captured in the book. It's not like a specific how to do something in this current age. It's that wisdom, that human that you were looking for. Like, what is going on
Yeah,
that
and do you know
makes them
what?
exceptional? How do they think? How are they operating?
And when I wrote the book, like AI was around, but I didn't, I'd never used, I mean, I'm assuming Claude and ChatGPT existed when I was initially writing the book. I'd never used it. And leaders were talking about AI, but because I started writing it in like 2021, 2020, yeah. But look, AI wasn't the big thing on the agenda. Actually, the big thing on the agenda was leading through a pandemic. That was one of the, that was one of the key things that they were navigating. How do you lead through this uncharted territory? So it's really interesting, where you just see how quickly, the world that we live in, how quickly things change. And yet, I think, irrespective of of what that change looks like, the lessons that are in the book, that they're foundational.
Mm. So I love everything you're saying. Tell me more about some of the wisdom, like some of the stuff that's stuck with you from your client work, and give me a sense of where you work with your clients, because the word confidant is in your intro. I use that word in your bio. The book obviously builds confidence at one level. Like there's an extra asset that says this person is serious about the work they're doing. Um, but you must have heard pieces of wisdom that obviously you've got to share in confidence. But then there's these kind of nuggets. So have you got any more beautiful nuggets of wisdom that we can share with people watching or listening to this?
Oh gosh, I feel like I need to go to Lance's book. And now that you asked that, shall I tell you
I'm
what?
sorry, Georgie, if I put you on the spot,
Where my
I
brain
find it
goes into
fascinating.
overwhelm is there are so many. Like common sense is, common sense is not common practice. This is one of the leaders. He talks about with his leadership team. A lot of common sense is not common practice. And it's so true. When you work with these leaders, it's often, basic principles done well. And I one of them talks about removing the wombats, which are the habits which are a waste of money, brains, and time.
I love that.
So this is about really being judicious with your time because time doesn't give refunds. So, it's focused attention. What are the things that matter? Um, I think one of the things, not that this is two words, but I think it's not like a one liner, but it's execution matters. And all of the leaders speak to the fact, and I've shared this earlier in our conversation about you can have great ideas. I could decide and tell you today, do you know what, Joe? I think I might run a marathon because I want to get fit, and I feel that's a really great goal that I would love to do. Well, there's one thing me saying that out loud, there's quite another thing doing it. So these leaders are execution jockeys. Um, Not that this is this piece of wisdom, I don't think is specifically from them. It's something they've borrowed from the sages and the people that have gone before them, but it's the two ears, one mouth. I think as leaders, the more you ascend, it's recognizing that your voice, you're in the pulpit. So even if you whisper, everyone's hearing, everyone's listening to you. And as leaders, you can really influence the shape of a conversation. And one leader said, he goes, before everyone knows where I stand, I want to know where they sit.
True.
And I think because, before everyone knows where I stand, if I tell you I think it's green, then everyone's going to be like, oh God, I thought it was pink. But like, clearly I'm going to say green because I'm so off. So, before everyone knows where I stand, I want to know where they sit. It's making sure that you've heard the room. So it's that two ears, one mouth, which I think for leaders can be very difficult because you often do know the answer. You're often it's obvious to you where things are going, but actually you don't want to disempower people,
Mm.
and you want people to feel like that collective investment in what you're creating. So I think the listening piece certainly came through from all of them, and I would say they don't say they all do it exceptionally well all the time, but it's something they're intentionally focused on,
Yes.
recognizing that. Recognizing the value that it creates when you do it well.
So that's fantastic. Just to pick up on that, and I'm just making sure I get the right language here, because there was something that was just in my mind, and I've dropped it, and it was fascinating to me. Yeah, this you mentioned stories earlier, and so what I was going to say about like aphorisms and like words of wisdom, things that you can kind of remember, and it's got a lot of meaning embedded. I imagine that finds its way into the culture of these organizations. Like that's probably something everybody could repeat, and kind of like some of those things are just going to be stuck inside the DNA of the organization and the businesses they build. But you mentioned stories earlier. Do you see the stories like the things that might become kind of legendary stories within the organization? Is that something that also seems to come from these
Yes.
stratospheric CEOs?
Look, I think to be a stratospheric CEO and equally to be a very successful CEO, because not they're not, there's lots of CEOs that aren't in the stratosphere, but they're still very successful at what they do. I think you have to be an extraordinary storyteller, because you want people to buy into the mission, the vision. And we all got stories like, you've been on a journey, I've been on a journey. And there are things happening to us all the time. There's things happening in our environment. And I think when you can connect to being a good storyteller, it's how people um connect with you as the leader. Like it takes people on the journey, and and so I think that storytelling, and that's the bit that I love. I get to help these leaders also recognize what those stories are,
Yeah.
because when you're in your own world, um it's a little bit, I was sharing before we came on that my son, big rugby lover, and he's got his podcast, and he just interviewed Ellie Kildan, and she was saying something like this as well, that you don't know what the bits are about you that are special, because it's well, you kind of do, but but they're just yours. And that's sometimes where you have the mirror or the person to play it back to you as they're hearing it, to be like, actually, that's really pretty awesome, or that's a
Yeah.
really interesting story that I would love, that I think would have real meaningful benefit if I shared that at a town hall, if I shared that at the next board meeting.
Yeah.
So I think being able to be that mirror and play back and also capture, because for me in my time with these leaders, it's about creating space and time and stepping out of a chaos of, and chaos is good, chaos is innovation, but stepping into a calm place. And I think the container that I create, I'm very intentional in that, because that for me is like you're creating this fertile soil to be able to have the meaningful conversations. And when everyone else is wanting to go fast, and slowing things down doesn't mean we are going slowly, but it's, we're coming from a place of more alignment, intentionality. So yeah, storytelling is, I think, by far number one of you know, the best skills that leaders need to be able to demonstrate today.
Yeah. And I think it's becoming more and more important. And you touched on AI earlier. Those stories, as you say, you act as a mirror. And I want to ask about your work with CEOs. Like, what do these people need? Is what they seem so exceptional. So I'd love to know like what you do with them. And we'll get
Yeah.
onto that. Um, but yeah, with AI, like those stories are the AI can't experience those experiences that led to those stories. Whatever it learns intellectually or manufactures, it's never going to have those real connections with those experiences. And I'd love you to talk to that if you've got
Yeah.
any more to say on that.
A leader once shared with me, like, when you speak from the heart, you connect to the heart. And I believe that to be true. Where we speak from is where we connect to. Look, AI can do a great job at refining. Like AI, it's, there are so many ways that it can make us more efficient. It can optimize, but stories, like, they're felt and they're lived. And I think if you're speaking from the heart, like, you're not just connecting through words, you're connecting through energy. And the way that I formulate and construct a sentence would be different to how AI did it. But the way I've constructed my sentence is the way that that's the way that I've interpreted the story or the experience, or these leaders have. And so I think that AI can be great for refinement, but actual personal stories and lessons and those anecdotes, like, the more real and human you can be, the more, like, the deeper that connection will be. And I think deeper connection leads to deeper trust. And I think, and I see this to be true, that
Mm,
any high performing team or organization, trust is at the nucleus. And I think for leaders as well, it's about showing appropriate vulnerability. I think it's unrealistic to be vulnerable completely. And it's interesting because in today's world, many people are like, be authentic, bring your full self. And yes, yes. And if I'm a shareholder in a company and I see that, the leader is speaking, and they're talking about how they're struggling with their making decisions, and that they're overwhelmed, me as shareholder is going to be like, right, is this person the right person to be leading this organization? So appropriate vulnerability is, let's see that you're not just a title. Let's hear a little bit more about you. Um, but at the same time, there is certain areas that's it's your trusted tribe. They get to hear,
yeah.
but not for the wider organization.
Yeah. Because there's approachable, there's kind of relatable to a point, but then these leaders have to be formidable. They're not just competing in a small space, there are formidable opponents, there are or formidable challenging conditions all around them. They've got to, yeah, it's a real, I imagine that's a real balance. Is that some of the work you do with those leaders to help them find that line? Like, tell me a
Yeah.
bit more about how you work with some of your clients.
Yeah, yes, I help them find the line. And the world of leadership is it's a lonely place. We live in a world where people can get misrepresented easily. You are in a scrutinized seat. People don't want to know you're having a bad day. You're expected to be 24/7. If you're a global leader, you're APAC, you're Europe, you're East Coast, West Coast. Like there's this accessibility, and everyone has a voice about you. And so I think creating that trusted space where people can be, I'm Bob, or I'm Nicola. They can be themselves, and it's free from judgment. And it's even if you are as a leader, you have a really um, trusted group of a leadership team. Sometimes people want to give you the polished apple. Sometimes people won't tell you the uncomfortable truths. And that's where, I'm able to come in and hold that space and come from a place of objectivity. I can speak the uncomfortable truths and I can help, it's just holding that space for them and asking the incisive questions as they're strategizing, as they're, thinking through the many streams of traffic that are going on in their heads, but helping them assimilate their thoughts and make their decisions because decisions have consequences. So and I'm not making the decision. They're making the decision, but I'm helping them pull in all the inputs that allow them to make the best possible decision they can in that moment.
I love that. And I think what you've just identified is because of the importance of that role, because of the people that are working around them are probably conscious of their own relationship. There's a power dynamic there. Able to have that filter, that place to make mistakes in the thinking before it becomes law, and not to kind of do too much sandboxing with the team that they say, are we going this way? Are we going that way? To actually rationalize that first seems like part of the work you do. But it sounds, do you do that through mostly, is it a pure coaching approach? Is it advisory and coaching?
It's
Like what?
advisory and coaching. And
Yeah.
I'm very intentional that I share that. I'm not a purist coach. Because of the purist coach, and I remember when I was doing my coaching qualifications, because I come from the corporate space, which is all about being incisive and sharing information, and I would keep giving suggestions, and they're like, no, you're supposed to just keep saying, what else, and I'm like, it was so I had to really I suppose it took me time to really step out of that corporate space to come into the purest coaching form. And then as I spent more and more time with leaders, you're learning and observing and experiencing so much of what they're going through that the advisory piece is if I feel I have a piece of information or a lesson or a how to that would be in service of the person I'm having a conversation with, then as long as nothing's confidential, I will share that. And I think one of the reasons, a primary reason people choose to work with me is because that advisory piece is part of what I do and how I show up. There's many people that can ask them, keep
Yeah.
asking the questions.
And I think just wrapping that back up with your book, that book is evidence of that. The synthesis, like as you say, leaders are lonely. They've got
Mm.
their own frame of reference most of the time. They can't bounce that off every other CEO because they're kind of in their own empire, building their own thing. And so the fact you can synthesize that and then bring that wisdom back to the people you work with in an advisory role, as well as asking brilliant questions to help them unlock their thing, and as you said earlier, holding up a mirror to extract those stories, to extract the genius that they're just taking for granted, possibly in some
I
of
like that. I'm
their
extracting
thinking.
your genius. I like that. You see, brilliant mirror. Thank you, Joe. I
You're
was,
welcome. But
uh,
no, I mean, this is what I see in what you do. I think it's an astonishing career, an astonishing role to
but
hold.
the other piece I do, which I love, I then convene leaders, whether that's through the Women in Leadership Network I run and their female-led events, but equally CEO circles. So for me, it's also how do I bring some of these CEOs together? How do I bring some of these, groups of really interesting leaders together and facilitate conversation that's really meaningful. So everyone comes away thinking, wow, that was a great evening. Not only did I meet really interesting people, I feel great from it and I've learned something and I formed a new alliance in the market. And
Amazing.
so that convening and building community has been something that's really I care deeply about, and I did it because I care deeply about it, but I didn't realize how valuable. I suppose I didn't realize how much people are dehydrated from that lack of kind of real peer-to-peer connection.
Yeah.
So those communities have been, have been amazing, and
Yeah.
they feel very, yeah, I just feel very passionate about them.
Fabulous. And you just like you started by talking about rarefied air being the sense of stratospheric. Those aren't, I'm imagining, not huge communities. These are people that can talk at a similar level because they've got similarity in the challenge, in the pressures, in the work that's had to go into getting there. That's a very unique um, peer-to-peer network. I love the word convene. That's a beautiful word to describe it.
And I think, look, here's the thing, I think these leaders, attend lots of different events, and often there is this people come to them for advice, or it's very it's not but it could be very it's kind of one directional, whereas the tables I like to create is it's very, you get it because you're a global leader, you're a CEO, so you actually understand leading a public company, what it means to be a public CEO, what it means to be misrepresented in the press, what it means to say one word and that cascades out in, you say something that's misrepresented. You get it. And I think creating the spaces of people who get it because they've lived it, they are in it, like that for me is a very I love the fact I get to do that.
That's amazing. That is magic in itself. So I want to wrap up here by, first of all, your son's podcast. We need to give a shout out to your son. So I'm going to ask you where people can find you, where they can watch your podcast episodes. Highly curated, like brilliant. You don't do lots of them. These are really valuable,
Yeah.
worthwhile sitting down, taking your time to listen to or watch. So
Yeah.
tell me about your son's podcast first. I think we've got to get that out of the way.
Yeah, so Arthur, he's 13. He started a podcast last year, at 12, called Rugby Legends, the Rugby Legends podcast. And he is a very, very passionate rugby player and watcher of the game. And he saw my podcast, Stratospheric Leaders, and he's like, wow, you get to work with like really interesting people. Like, I'd love to do that in rugby. And so I said, well, look, do a vision board, like just cut out some pictures of people that you would like to interview, thinking there's no way he's going to do it. Like, he's 12, like, he wants to be out playing football with his friends. And he did. He created a vision board. And there's something magical about when you start to build out an idea, if you're coming with the right energy and the right intent, because I put like an SOS out to my network to be like, oh my gosh, I've told my son I'm going to connect him to rugby players. Like, does anyone know of anyone? It's amazing how when you mobilize the network, people know people who know people. And he started off with the former England captain of the 2004 World Cup winning team, and the current England coach, because we bumped into the England coach at an airport. And so he started with this extraordinary trio of rugby people in the rugby world, and it's all been word of mouth referral. Like, this is the you know Finn Smith, who's the current fly half, so, oh, you should meet Tommy. And like, it's just, so he's living his best
It's
life.
exceptional. I
Um,
love that.
and you know what? Actually, it's good that you and I are having this conversation, because he wants to write a book called From Grassroots to Greats, and he
Great
wants to
title.
capture. Yeah, he wants to capture all the. I should probably shouldn't. I mean, hopefully he doesn't mind me telling people this. He wants to capture all the lessons from these interviews, and he does one. He publishes one every 3 weeks religiously. He publishes on social media every day, and he wants to capture all those lessons into a book.
Ah,
So
we've
that's the
got to
plan.
make that happen. Yeah, we'll talk about that. And tell me, like, Georgie, where can people find your podcast? Where can they find the various other ways you work with people? Sorry, I've got a bit lost now because I'm thinking about Arthur's podcast. But yeah, where do people find you? What's the
Yeah,
best
so
way?
georgiedickins.com, and it's Dickens with an I, not Charles Dickens, so dickens.com. And then you can find out all the ways to work with me. And Stratospheric Leaders is the evolution from the book Stratospheric CEOs, and that's on Spotify and Apple. All the regular places you will find podcasts, you will find Stratospheric Leaders. And to your point, this has never been for me about quantity. This is very focused and bringing quality leaders to have a quality conversation that hopefully then leads to quality outcomes for the individuals listening.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Georgie. I'm very proud to have published your book. Thank you for your generosity on this podcast. And I'm very grateful. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Joe.